Welcome to another episode of Explained by AI. Okay, so like detective mode activated. Today, we're going deep into the world of internet mysteries to solve a case that I bet we've all experienced. The dreaded bad internet connection. You know, the one that makes online games lag and videos buffer forever and sometimes even kicks you offline completely.
Right.
Don't worry though, we've got some awesome intel from our sources to help us crack the case and get you back online smoothly. First things first, let's meet the usual suspects. The modem and the router. You've probably seen these little boxes blinking away somewhere in your house, but have you ever stopped to think about what they're actually doing?
Those blinking lights are actually a good sign. It means they're working hard to keep you connected. Think of the internet as a giant network of information, kind of like its own language.
Yeah.
Your modem acts as a translator, converting those internet signals into something your computer, phone, and other devices can understand. It's the bridge between your home and the vast digital world out there.
So the modem brings the internet into our house. But what about sharing that connection with all of my devices? That's where the router comes in, right?
You got it. The router is like the control center for your home network. It takes the internet signal from the modem and shares it with all the devices in your house, your phone, laptop, gaming console, even your smart TV. And it doesn't just share the internet, it also creates a local network, or LAN. So your devices can talk to each other, like when you stream a video from your phone to the TV.
So I want to print something from my laptop, the router, make sure the printer knows what to do. That's pretty cool. And the router handles both the wired connections and the Wi-Fi, right?
Exactly. The router is a multitasking superstar. Wired connections, like when you use an Ethernet cable, are part of the LAN we just talked about. But most of us use Wi-Fi these days, and the router is the maestro of that wireless orchestra, too.
Speaking of Wi-Fi, sometimes my connection feels like it's moving slower than a snail. Why does that happen?
Well, there are a few things that can cause Wi-Fi woes. One common culprit is interference. Imagine a bunch of radio stations trying to broadcast on the same frequency. It's going to be a jumbled mess, right? Wi-Fi works in a similar way, using radio waves to transmit data. If there are other devices nearby using the same frequency, like your neighbor's Wi-Fi or even a microwave, it can cause interference and slow things down.
So my microwave is messing with my Wi-Fi. That's wild. What can I do about it?
First, it helps to understand that there are two main Wi-Fi frequencies, 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. Think of 2.4 gigahertz as a tough but slow-moving turtle. It has a longer range and can penetrate walls easily, but it might not be the fastest. 5 gigahertz is like a cheetah, super speedy, but with a shorter range and not as good at going through obstacles.
So if I'm far away from the router, I should connect to the 2.4 gigahertz network. But if I need speed and I'm closer, I go for the 5 gigahertz. I never knew that.
That's a great way to think about it. Now back to the interference problem. One thing you can do is change the Wi-Fi channel your router is using, kind of like tuning into a different radio station.
Wait, I can change the channel. Where do I even do that?
Most routers have an option to change the channel in their settings. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's like a secret control panel for your Wi-Fi. While we're talking about router settings, there are some other cool things you can do, like prioritizing certain devices, using a feature called Quality of Service, or QoS.
Quality of service? Sounds fancy. What does that do?
Let's say you're on a video call with your friends, and your little sister starts streaming a movie. QoS can make sure your video call stays clear and doesn't get choppy by giving it priority over the movie. It's like giving your video call a VIP pass on the internet highway.
So with QoS, I can tell my router which devices are the most important at any given time. That's super helpful. What about those guest networks I've seen in the router settings? What are those for?
A guest network is like having a separate Wi-Fi lounge just for visitors. It's a good way to keep your main network secure because guests won't have access to your personal files or devices on your main network. It's like having a separate Wi-Fi password for your friends when they come over.
That makes sense. It's like giving them a key to the guest room, but not the whole house. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Wi-Fi, but what about when I use a cable to connect to the internet? Sometimes even that connection can be slow or unreliable.
You're right. Even wired connections can have their quirks. The first thing to check is the cable itself. Make sure it's securely plugged in on both ends and there are no visible damages, like kinks or breaks. You might also want to try a different Ethernet cable, just in case the one you're using is faulty.
So even cables can go bad. I always thought those were super reliable.
They usually are, but sometimes they can wear out or get damaged. If the cable seems fine, then we need to look a little deeper. Every device on your network has a unique identifier called an IP address. It's like a home address for your computer or phone.
So just like my house is a street address, my computer has an IP address on the internet.
Exactly. And just like the Postal Service needs to know your address to deliver mail, Your router uses IP addresses to send data to the right device.
That makes sense. But how do devices get their IP addresses? Do I have to assign them myself?
Don't worry, most routers handle that automatically using something called DHCP, or Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. It's like a digital post office that assigns addresses to new devices joining the network. Pretty convenient, right?
Super convenient. So DHCP takes care of things most of the time, but you mentioned something called static IPs earlier. What are those all about?
Static IPs are like giving a device a permanent address instead of letting DHCP assign one automatically. You might need to use a static IP for things like printers or game servers where you need a consistent address for other devices to connect to.
So static IPs are kind of like reserved parking spots for specific devices on my network.
You got it. They're a bit more advanced, but it's good to know about them if you ever want to set up something more complex on your home network.
Whoa! I'm learning so much about how my internet connection actually works. So we've covered modems, routers, Wi-Fi troubleshooting, and even touched on the world of IP addresses. I feel like a tech whiz already. Any other quick tips before we wrap up this part of our deep dive?
Absolutely. One simple but often overlooked factor is router placement. Think of your router like a radio tower. The higher and more central it is, the better the signal will reach throughout your house.
So don't hide it away in a cabinet or behind the TV.
Exactly. Try to place it in an open area up high, if possible, and away from things that can block the signal, like walls and furniture. It can make a surprising difference.
Got it. What about those Wi-Fi extenders and mesh networks I keep hearing about? Are those worth checking out?
They can be lifesavers for larger homes or areas with weak Wi-Fi signal. Extenders are like little Wi-Fi boosters that rebroadcast your signal, while mesh networks create a whole team of interconnected nodes that blanket your house with seamless coverage.
So extenders are like a Wi-Fi megaphone, and mesh networks are like a Wi-Fi army. That's awesome.
A great way to think about it. Both can help extend the reach and improve the performance of your Wi-Fi. Mesh networks tend to offer a more robust and reliable solution, but extenders can be a good option if you just need a little boost in a specific area.
Okay, one last thing before we move on to the next part of our investigation. You mentioned power line adapters earlier. What are those and how do they work?
Power line adapters are a really clever way to extend your network using your home's existing electrical wiring. You plug one adapter into an outlet near your router and connect it with an Ethernet cable. Then you plug another adapter into an outlet in the room where you need internet access, and boom, you've got a wired connection using your electrical wiring.
Wait, the internet signal can travel through the electrical wires in my house. That's mind-blowing.
It is pretty cool. It's a great option if you don't want to run long Ethernet cables all over the place or deal with the potential hassles of Wi-Fi extenders.
This has been an amazing crash course in internet troubleshooting. We've learned so much about modems, routers, Wi-Fi, and even those mysterious IP addresses. But our investigation isn't over yet. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive deeper into those secret router settings and unlock even more tricks to optimize your connection.
We'll be back soon. Welcome back, Internet Explorers. I hope you're ready for round 2 because we're about to unlock the secrets of your router's settings.
Okay, I'm ready to level up my router skills.
Mm-hmm.
In the last part, you mentioned that there's a whole world of customization hiding in those settings. Where do we even begin?
Let's start where we left off with Wi-Fi. Remember how we talked about changing the Wi-Fi channel to avoid interference? Well, there's another setting called channel width that can really boost your speed.
Channel width. What does that even mean? Is it like making the Wi-Fi signal wider?
It's a good way to think about it. Each Wi-Fi channel is like a highway for data. The wider the channel, the more data can flow through at once, which means faster speeds. But just like a wider highway can get congested with traffic, a wider Wi-Fi channel can sometimes be more susceptible to interference from other devices.
So it's like a balancing act between speed and reliability.
Exactly. On the 2.4 gigahertz band, which tends to have more interference, it's usually best to stick with a narrower channel width. But on the 5 gigahertz band, where there's less congestion, you can often crank up the channel width for maximum speed.
So if I want to download a game super fast, I should try the 5 gigahertz band with a wider channel width.
That's a good strategy. Now, while we're talking about optimizing your Wi-Fi, have you ever heard of something called beamforming?
Beamforming. It sounds like something out of Star Wars.
It kind of is. Beamforming allows your router to focus its Wi-Fi signal directly towards your devices, like a spotlight, instead of broadcasting it in all directions. This can really improve the signal strength and speed, especially if you're further away from the router.
So instead of spreading the Wi-Fi signal everywhere, it aims it right at my laptop or phone. That sounds way more efficient.
Exactly. It's like having a personal Wi-Fi beam just for you.
Okay, so we've got channel width and beamforming. Any other cool Wi-Fi tricks hiding in those settings?
Oh, one more. Some routers have an option called Wi-Fi Multimedia, or WMM. This is like QoS, but specifically for Wi-Fi devices. It gives priority to things like streaming videos and online games so they don't get interrupted by other devices using the internet.
So if I'm watching a movie and my brother starts downloading a huge file, WMM will make sure my movie doesn't start buffering. That's awesome.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about security. We've covered how to make your Wi-Fi faster and more reliable, but we also need to make sure it's safe and secure. You wouldn't leave the front door to your house unlocked, right? Well, securing your router is just as important.
That's a good point. I always make sure my Wi-Fi password is strong and hard to guess, but is there anything else I should be doing?
One of the most important things is to keep your router's firmware up to date.
Hold on, what's firmware? Is that like an app for my router?
It's kind of like an operating system that controls how your router works. Just like you update your phone or computer to get new features and security improvements, you need to update your router's firmware to keep it running smoothly and safely.
So those update notifications aren't just annoying pop-ups. They're actually important.
They are. Many routers can automatically check for and install updates, so it's usually a pretty painless process. Keeping your firmware up to date helps protect you from hackers and viruses.
Okay, I'll make sure to check for updates. You also mentioned something called a firewall earlier. What exactly does that do?
A firewall is like a digital security guard for your network. It constantly monitors the data coming in and out of your router looking for anything suspicious. If it spots something that looks like a threat, like a hacker trying to break into your network, it blocks it before it can do any damage.
So it's like an extra layer of protection on top of my antivirus software.
Exactly. Most routers have built-in firewalls that are usually enabled by default. But it's always good to check the settings and make sure everything is configured properly.
This is all great information. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand how to make my internet connection both fast and secure. But before we go any further, I have a question that's been bugging me. What's the deal with those different Wi-Fi security protocols I see in the settings? There's WPA2, WPA3. What's the difference and which one should I use?
That's a great question. Those protocols are different ways of encrypting your Wi-Fi data, which basically means scrambling it up so that hackers can't read it if they try to intercept it. WPA2 has been the standard for a while, but WPA3 is the newer, more secure option.
So if my router supports WPA3, I should definitely switch to that one.
Absolutely. It offers stronger encryption and better protection against brute force attacks, which is where hackers try to guess your password by trying a bunch of different combinations.
Okay, WPA3 it is. I'm all about that extra security. So what other settings can we tweak to make our internet connection even better?
If you're feeling adventurous, you can explore features like port forwarding and DMZ. These are more advanced options that allow you to open specific ports on your router, which can be helpful for things like online gaming or running a web server from your home.
Port forwarding and DMZ. Those sound pretty intense. When would I ever need to use those?
Port forwarding is often used for online gaming, where you need to allow incoming connections to your computer or gaming console. DMZ, which stands for Demilitarized Zone, is a bit more extreme. It basically exposes a single device to the internet without any firewall protection.
So DMZ is like putting a device in the internet's Wild West. That sounds a little risky.
It can be, which is why it's generally not recommended unless you really know what you're doing and have a specific reason for using it.
Okay, maybe I'll stick with the less extreme settings for now. But it's cool to know about all these options. I'm starting to feel like a real router wizard.
You're getting there. Remember, every router is different, so the exact settings and menus might look a little different. But don't be afraid to explore and experiment. The more you learn about your router's capabilities, the better you can customize your network to fit your needs.
This has been an incredible deep dive into router settings. We've covered everything from Wi-Fi optimization to security essentials, and even touched on some of those super advanced features.
And there's still more to come. In Part 3, we'll tackle some common internet myths, demystify some confusing tech jargon, and give you even more practical tips for troubleshooting and improving your connection. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our internet troubleshooting adventure. We've explored the land of modems and routers, navigated the tricky world of Wi-Fi, and even learned how to beef up our security with firewalls and strong passwords. But we're not done yet.
That's right. In this final part, we're going to bust some common internet myths, decode some of that confusing tech jargon you might have heard, and give you even more tips to keep your connection running smoothly.
I'm ready to separate internet fact from fiction. What's the first myth we're tackling?
Let's talk about download speeds. You've probably heard your parents talk about megabits per second, or MBPs. That's how we measure internet speed, specifically how fast you can download things from the internet. A lot of people think that if you have a higher download speed, everything online will automatically be faster.
So if my internet plan says I have super fast download speeds, I should be able to watch videos without any buffering and download games in a blink of an eye.
It would be great if it were that simple, but there's actually a lot more to it. Think of it like driving on a highway. Even if you have a super fast car, you might still encounter traffic jams or road construction that slow you down. It's the same with the internet. Even if your download speed is fast, things like network congestion, too many people using the internet at the same time, or slow website servers can impact how fast things actually load for you.
So even if my internet plan promises lightning fast speeds, there are other factors that can affect how my connection actually performs.
Exactly. It's important to have realistic expectations and understand that internet speed is kind of like a team effort between your internet provider, the websites you're visiting, and even your own devices.
Okay, that makes sense. Download speed is important, but it's not the whole story. What's another internet myth we should know about?
Here's one you might have heard. Closing all your apps will make your internet faster. While it's true that some apps can use up internet bandwidth even when you're not actively using them, closing everything won't magically solve all your internet problems.
So it's not like a video game where I need to close all the other programs to make it run better.
Not quite. Modern computers and phones are pretty good at managing resources, and simply closing apps won't usually make a huge difference in your internet speed. There are other more effective ways to improve your connection.
Like what? Give me all the secret tips.
Well, we've already covered a lot of them, like optimizing your router settings, picking the right Wi-Fi channel, and using a wired connection whenever possible. But here are a few bonus tips to add to your internet toolbox.
Okay, I'm taking notes.
First, make sure to keep your devices up to date. Those software updates that sometimes pop up might seem annoying, but they often include performance improvements and bug fixes that can make your internet run more smoothly.
So those updates are actually important. I thought they were just trying to trick me into restarting my computer.
It's always a good idea to stay on top of those updates. It's like giving your devices a tune-up to keep them running at their best. Another thing to keep in mind is to be mindful of background downloads. If you're trying to watch a movie and your computer is busy downloading a huge file in the background, it's going to compete for internet bandwidth and might cause your movie to buffer.
So maybe pause those big downloads while I'm streaming a movie or playing an online game.
Exactly. You can always resume them later when you're not using the internet as actively. It's all about sharing the internet love between your devices.
Got it. Any other pro tips to share?
Have you ever heard of a CDN? It stands for Content Delivery Network.
CDN. That sounds kind of complicated.
It's not as scary as it sounds. Imagine a network of servers all over the world that store copies of websites and online content. When you visit a website that uses a CDN, it automatically connects you to the server that's closest to you geographically.
So instead of connecting to a website's main server, which could be far away, I get connected to a server that's closer to me. That's smart.
Exactly. It can make websites load much faster, especially if the main server is located in another country. The best part is that a lot of websites use CDNs automatically, so you don't even have to do anything special to benefit from them.
CDNs sound like a secret weapon for faster browsing.
They're one of the many amazing things happening behind the scenes to make your internet experience better.
This has been an awesome deep dive into the world of internet troubleshooting. We've learned so much about modems, routers, Wi-Fi, and even how to optimize our settings for maximum speed and security. I feel like I can conquer any internet problem now.
That's the spirit. Remember, the internet is an incredible tool for learning, connecting with people, and having fun. And now you have the knowledge and skills to make sure your connection is always up to the task.
Exactly. No more feeling helpless when the Wi-Fi goes down or things start running slow. We've got this. And that's a wrap for this episode of Explained by AI. Do you have any topics that you would like to have explained? Drop in the comments.